Hello, I'm Vincent Everett, and this is my talk for Language World 2026. And I submitted this proposal um, looking at different approaches to MFL, providing a rich and dynamic balance of facets, whether it leads to a messy eclecticism or if it's possible to find a coherent vision that drives learning forward, with examples from the classroom with successes, tweaks, and failures, a robust vision of progression including communication, grammar, linguistics, creativity, accuracy, and culture. And then when I pushed go on this, I realized it said half an hour. So that's what we're going to try and squeeze in. Now, there's been quite a bit of open season on MFL and all the things that need to be done. Here's a quick collection of things that I've seen in the press this year, either in the national press or in educational publications or in modern languages publications. And you can see there's quite a lot wrong with modern languages. Yes, please stop, because as I said, we've only got half an hour. Maybe that's not what's wrong with MFL. I think probably before that, we ought to be looking at this. If we're going to say, can we solve an easily solved problem with MFL that will make a difference? On average, pupils of the same prior attainment get a grade lower in languages than in their other subjects. On average, normally an average is a tiny marginal difference. This is a whole grade. Anyway, that's a different talk. So perhaps all those things that we saw, culture, communication, transactional language, grammar, linguistics, perhaps they're all part of the richness of MFL. And rather than skewing towards one and focusing on one, we need to make sure we're celebrating and making the most of all of them. That's the beauty of our subject. Do I agree with this? Language is learned when pupils use the language for real communication, creating meaning, not for the sake of practicing bits of language. And that's people like Florencia Henshaw. This is from her book Common Ground with Maris Hawking. Pupils should be, here we are, this bit down here, creating meaning, interpreting or expressing meaning, not practicing the language. Okay, do I agree with that? Do I agree with this? Learning in languages, like any learning, happens when the content is broken down to one step at a time and practiced. And asking the pupils to communicate at the novice stage is inappropriate because they haven't yet mastered all the vocabulary and grammar. And that's from things like the Ofsted Research Review. Sorry, I've got my laser here. It's set to stun, don't worry. And the webinars that came with it. So in languages, should be explicitly and directly focused on teaching the language, heavily on the language to be learned, and make sure pupils are secure before you move on. And unlike history, it shouldn't be any incidental learning, and there should not be rich or complex contexts. It must be boiled down to just the essentials. And this is what also gave us the novice and the expert thing, so that until a tiny handful of pupils getting grade 9 at GCSE, Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 is novice. And it also gave us the red turtles, green dogs, making sure the language is correct webinars that told us how to build a curriculum. So we've got this kind of standoff, haven't we? We've got the red corner versus the blue corner, and this is kind of the head, and this is this is the heart, isn't it? The red one, that's good. And the blue is the head. So understanding meaning and creating meaning, not a collection of grammatical forms to be learnt. In the blue corner, it's all about knowledge and concepts. It's not just a collection of random things you can say. And of course, look at this bit in the middle with all the pretty colours. That's where we're going to be interested in being. The blue corner people, yes, it is blue, have questions for us. So when we learn pets, or when we teach pets, for example, in Year 7, why? Why are we teaching something where every pupil's got their own animal and all the class have to learn it so they can understand it? It's just a list of random nouns. You're not going to meet them again when you move on. You may as well not have taught them and you could have been teaching important high-frequency words. And we have to engage with these ideas. These are very serious questions. And it's fundamental, isn't it? Are we concentrating on the wrong words, not just teaching pets, but throughout when we teach languages? Are we using communication as an excuse? Are we teaching phrases? J'ai un chien qui s'appelle Fluffy. I have a dog whose name is Fluffy. Qui s'appelle doesn't not mean whose name is. We're teaching them phrases without telling them what the words mean because we're glossing over. And really fundamental are these things that we reach for. We've got pupils who are not necessarily engaged with languages. We go, oh, let's make it more communicative. Let's have more authentic materials. Let's have more culture, because we think that will make it appealing and engaging. Are we actually piling on the cognitive demands there? When really we shouldn't. Well, what we're saying is, oh, don't worry about the little words. And then we have pupils who are permanently confused because no one ever tells them. Sometimes it's un, sometimes it's une. It could be le, la, le, de, du, and then there's a, which means un means a, but a means at or has. But sometimes it can mean flavour of, like à la fraise. What's going? We have pupils who we're letting down because we're concentrating on these ideas instead of sorting this out. Well, when we teach pets, I do say to pupils, we are not going to be talking about pets for the next 5 years of French. We're not. We're going to do many, many more things. Watch out, because we might be concentrating on the words like dog, cat, bird, and we're not properly doing the little words, which are way more important. So, we're doing pets, but I, as your teacher, have my eye on these words. Un, une, j'ai, je n'ai pas de, and the phonics of oiseau, poisson, cochon, dinde. These things that we've been doing for phonics, this is great to practice that. Maybe this is what we're really doing. I mentioned this in a case study in Sylvia and Jennifer's book, if you want to see a bit more. So what we do is, obviously we need our pupils to understand that je is je, I, plus et, have. And je n'ai pas is similar, and Mr. Apostrophe has eaten the E out of je and the E out of ne and replaced it with an apostrophe. So there you go. We don't only do that. We do also, I'm not going to play it now, but this is a YouTube video of a steam train. And we chant je n'ai pas de, getting quicker and quicker with the steam train. Je n'ai pas de, je n'ai pas de, je n'ai pas de, je n'ai pas de. So every pupil in my class can say je n'ai pas de, but every pupil in my class should know that it's je plus ne, with the apostrophe replacing the E because of the vowel, pas, and then de, used for negatives. Je n'ai pas de. What happens when you try this? They still remember chat, chien, and poisson, and serpent, and araignée forever, even though they never see them again. And they still mess up je and j'ai, even though they see it in most lessons for the rest of their French. And things like j'aime. They should know that that is je and aime, I like. So then they put Kevin, j'aime jouer au tennis, because they've learnt j'aime as a thing. Kevin, I like to play tennis, and they forgot to remove the I. And je n'aime pas, for I don't like. And so a pupil who understood j'aime should be incapable of writing I don't like without the word aime in there somewhere. I don't like has to contain the word like. But we get je n'aime pas all the time, because maybe they're not learning it in that way. So there are 2 points of view. If you are going from securing mastery of what people should be learning, because you've decided that je is very important, overall knowledge broken down into logical steps, you don't move on. I mean, I'm not saying you carry on doing pets for 5 years, but you do a lot of things with je and je n'ai pas de. Maybe pencil cases or something, I don't know, but then you're doing more random lexical items which may not be high frequency. But anyway, you want to not move on. If you're working from a point of view of observing how pupils' learning is actually growing, what sticks and what doesn't, then I think you can notice that dog gets remembered and fish gets remembered, but je doesn't. And yes, you move on, but you've got your own agenda that you're going to come back to. But maybe learning's not happening in this way. Also, while we're doing pets, linguistics was on our list. And one of the big things is you suddenly discover that that animal at home that you love is not a dog. It's called a dog in English, but in French it's a chien. In Spanish it's perro. In German it's a hund. There's some German. Haha. They wanted me to squeeze some German in. Right, I've done that. I've only got half an hour. And, you know, dog, French chien, is from canine, same as canine, which is interesting. And hunt is where we get hound. So this is also the idea that languages are linked, and one language comes from another. And people study this. And actually nobody knows where dog comes from. No one knows where perro comes from. So that could be your job one day when you leave school. Gender, it's not the gender of the dog, it's the gender of the word. And how does English cope without gender? If French and Spanish have this way of, and German have ways of linking gluing one word in a sentence to another, and the fact that English pretty much does it by having very strict word order. These are all very interesting things that you do straight away in year 7 or primary school. And it's, yeah, gender is of the word, because they might have been taught a noun is a person, place, or thing. On the way home, I tripped over a noun. Someone threw some nouns at me. No, a noun is not a person, place, or thing. A noun is a word. And then, of course, gender is the gender of the word. Adjective word order, of course, they come across that, the different ways of saying things. Who is called? J'ai un chien qui s'appelle Fluffy. So you don't say dog's name is, you say he calls himself. My dog calls himself. That's quite fun because there's a dog talking to himself. But this is the whole thing of languages work differently to each other, and it's right there. And of course, things like guinea pig needing new words because languages evolve. So some of these things are quite visceral when you discover that things are not how you thought they were. That's not a dog you've got at home. It's just called a dog. So yes, certainly linguistics is right there. Another thing we do in year 7, I was here last week at the windmill, getting ready for this year's exhibition, is an art exhibition where everyone in year 7 creates an artwork and they describe it in French. And again, the blue corner people have got some questions for us. What if we are so focused on the product, not the process? And that's the case for the windmill exhibition, because we're so focused on we've got to get this done by the deadline, we've got to get the artwork done and the picture, and it's all got to be beautiful. But it could also be just in a normal unit. Oh, it's in the test, we better learn it just for the test. And we're not paying attention to the actual learning process, we're just covering what we've got to cover. The pupil's attention might be too directed towards the meaning and not enough towards the form of the words. That at first sight seems incredible that you could say the pupils are too directed towards meaning. We'll have to come back to that. But the idea of distraction, being distracted and not focusing on what they should be. What if they bring in random words they're never going to need again? Like they put a unicorn in their picture, which you don't need. What if they're trying to say things they can't and they fall into error? And we say, oh, well, they're communicating well. There's a nice picture and they tried to describe it. Isn't that lovely? What a lovely thing. But actually, the learning's not happening because they're making mistakes. These are all excellent questions. On the other hand, what keeps me going through this is that the reason we do a and the, and gender and agreement and word order and prepositions and high frequency verbs, and we've gone on from a dog who is called Fluffy to a penguin who is eating a fish, a cat who is chasing a unicorn with a key, and then knowing how to handle maybe starting ER verb endings, it's going to come back later, is so that 200 pupils can all draw whatever picture they like and write about it. Because creativity is grammar and they're not incompatible. Very quickly. So yes, here they are describing. You can see building it up, getting a bit better. And these are the things that we're marking it for. There's another one. Pupils might be too focused on meaning. What do we even mean by meaning? There's this that chien means dog. I can be tested that chien means dog. There's this equivalence, French to English, meaning. What does it mean? Or there's, like Florencia Henshaw was saying right back at the beginning, creating meaning, saying something you want to say. French for meaning is vouloir dire. Spanish is que quiere decir. What does it want to say? Actually wanting to say something. So, is this important? This is from my year 10 Spanish. Once upon a time, they're actually in year 12 now. And this is something that they wrote. Actually, did it speaking first, but I haven't got time for that today. They wrote about going shopping in Norwich, and the whole class were writing about going shopping in Norwich. That's what we were practicing in year 10. And this is about having to go to Norwich and do clothes shopping. But what you really want to do is go to Ed's Diner, and you're going to have a milkshake and looking forward to it. And when you got there, it was closed forever. In year 11, I didn't let them get this out and look at it. When we were starting to build up to the mock speaking exam, I was thinking, what would you say if I asked about shopping? Get your ideas ready. Not learning the Spanish off by heart, but what ideas have you got? The next one's horribly out of focus, but that's all right. You can just listen to me talking about it. This is the same pupil, and he could instantly, on a piece of paper, just rewrite all this. And it's a rewriting of the same story. Why? Because it had meaning for him. It was a terrible episode when Ed's Diner was closed. And he could redo most of the things he did in year 10 because it had meaning for him. Actually, it's slightly different. It's a slightly different story. And I'm sure if he spoke about it in his speaking exam, it would be different again. Other pupils in the class were starting from scratch because they had done sentences in year 10 that were just practicing the language. I like to go to Norwich because I can't go with my friends, for example, okay? And they could still do it, but they didn't have the recall and the instant ability, and the story wasn't there. So I think even from the standpoint of a change in long-term memory, having something meaningful is important. We need to keep on with this because AQA also have their own version of meaning. So what impressed her about the school, they grew fruit and veg on the school field, is what impressed her. But AQA don't want that kind of understanding the meaning of what impressed her. It's not actually a comprehension question. You have to have the school used part of the field. That's what really impressed her, that they used part of the field. If you don't have that, so AQA are testing the meaning. Do you know the meaning of words like chien is dog? Not comprehension of what actually impressed her. So we need to keep an eye on that. And here are some year 9. These are not their real names, but we're going to look at some work and them creating meaning and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So this is, let's say who this is. This is something from year 9. This is Kirsty. I love to go to the beach, especially if it's nice, because I can eat ice creams, but I have to swim in the sea with my family sometimes. When I went last weekend, I dropped my phone in the sea. I cried. My friend says, I could be useful. I can buy you a new phone. Next weekend, I'm going to go to Norwich. I like to go to Norwich because I could buy clothes. Okay, a whole story about... and this was a test. This was sprung on them without any preparation, just here's a piece of paper, write me about going to the beach or what you do. I mean, they've moved it on to going to Norwich. And then in January, we had a very important man came in, and he said to us in no uncertain terms, you must not allow pupils to make mistakes. You must ensure mastery at sentence level. You should not move on too quickly. And this worried me a bit about my year 9s, because there's people like Ruby, for example, trying like Kirsty to write a story in exam conditions, going to the seaside, going to the arcades, looking for shelves, but going on the arcades because it rained, and all the games she played. And then something about she fell over because of her shoes. And I have here pushed her into making mistakes that she shouldn't have otherwise made. How are we doing for time? 19 minutes, we're going to be okay. This is an extroverb. So should I have moved on? She knows she's making mistakes. She thinks she's focusing on quality, not quantity. Is my entire approach wrong? Should I have not even asked them to do this, to write paragraphs, to be inventive? So we talked about this as a class, and whether with our next topic we should have a different approach. It was jobs, which is less personal, less imaginative, more focus on the language and accuracy maybe, talking about the future. And I shared some examples of how the work was going so far on jobs. So here's Evelyn. I'd say this is pretty much perfect in terms of mistakes. Also, not a word of it is true. And I think she might be a bit like my year 10 Spanish class who wrote things to practice the language. If I asked her to rewrite this now, she'd be starting from scratch. She wouldn't have any of it ready to go. It would be, oh, I don't even know what I wrote. I just wrote some stuff because I was practicing the language. Yeah, this paragraph makes sense. Yeah, okay, fair enough, it does. Here's Henry. Henry is writing about his dad and cricket and Australia, and he does his piece standing up, and he has a lovely time saying all sorts of things, and sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it's a bit random, sometimes there's mistakes, but he's trying to say things that he wants to say, and he's having a great time. And also you can see he speaks French, but some of the things when he writes them, we'll come back to that later. Here's Dylan. Oh, first of all, this is Dylan. Sorry, this is a bit out of focus. This is Dylan's going to the beach one. I like to go to the beach with my brother because I can play with the ball at the beach. My dad hates swimming in the sea because he prefers the pool, and he hates crabs. And here's a crab, and this could be a hermit crab maybe. So moving on to jobs. When I go to college, I want to leave school because I want to swim in the sea with my crab friends. In the future, I'm going to ban croissants. Crabs told me I don't like croissants. I love crabs. And I've had to say, yeah, risk-taking is excellent for language learning, maybe. What would you actually write in a test? Because this isn't going to... here's Kirsty, who we saw earlier. This is, I would like to work in a hospital because I can earn lots of money. I decided to work with children in a hospital when I was 10. And then I hate to work with cars, all that sorts of stuff in here. She's got some stuff in, she's got an unfortunately in there, and I think she's got a would-be maybe somewhere. This is very interesting. Having said j'aime and j'ai and je n'ai pas de, she spelled jamais, which is something we've seen in class cropping up in a few units but never really dwelled upon. But she's made it J apostrophe, which is very interesting. So we decided as a class, having looked at those across from Evelyn's, which was very careful and was practicing the language, through to the other ones which were more harum scarum, I'm going to write what I want and see how it turns out. We decided to do another practice piece differently and call it the perfect paragraph. And just like in food tech, you'd be using French that you knew and seeing what you can make out of it. And I wasn't going to give them the free hand to write what they wanted. It was going to be about being a teacher. So here's Kirsty for a start. Don't like this perfect paragraph. She's still got a, unfortunately, she's still got it would be. Okay. I don't know if this has made her slightly better or slightly worse. She's got spelling mistakes still, some questionable accents. Here's Dylan. Oh, yes, perfect French. I would like to work in a school, and I hope to earn lots of money. I want to study history. I think that's spelt wrong, because I hope to be a teacher of history. That might be spelt right. But I don't like working with animals. I hate children because I prefer crabs. So it's slightly more careful. So when it came to their assessment, I said to them, okay, I've got some bits of work from you, some of them deliberately careful, some of them writing whatever you want. I'm not going to specify in the assessment. You can write what you feel like writing. So here's Ruby that we saw, who had the going to the arcades. And this is her being more careful, maybe. She's still got a problem with the and a. And she's tried to say, my friend wants, and doesn't know that you need to change the verb, or how to change the verb ending of vouloir. Okay. Here's Henry. Bonjour. And he originally put, my name is, even though no teacher has ever told him that je m'appelle means my name is. My name is Henry, I'm Henry, and I hope to be a chef with my dad. My dad is Gordon Ramsay, and he loves cooking. I would like to be happy with my jam because my jam is beautiful. Also, I like Australia, and I would like to work here, but the public in Australia hates my dad because he hates cricket and he's English. Henry is still writing about his dad and Australia and cricket. Here's Dylan. You want to see what Dylan wrote? I hope to be a crab hairdresser because I love crabs. He's maybe more accurate. And he's put, I like this writing. I took risks. So that conversation we had, he likes taking risks. I think we can understand that. Kirsty. In the future, I would like to travel and see the world because I think it's fun, especially if I'm with my friend. Okay. And she's got all this. C'est simple, being famous, c'est simple comme bonjour. That's a nice idiomatic expression she has found somewhere for herself and thinks, I'm going to use this in French. And she's used it, just like she always uses, unfortunately, because she likes it, and she uses a would be somewhere in there. I can't see it. Also, she's put, I want my friend to be rich. She has no way of knowing that you can't take, I want my friend to be rich and make it into a sentence, because French doesn't work like English. So when you say, don't let pupils make mistakes, in theory, she knew all of those words. There was no way of her knowing that it wasn't going to work. Anyway, that's what happened with my Year 9. What did we conclude? We concluded that this self-awareness and pupils balancing accuracy, expression, risk-taking, and control was important, to have self-awareness of that. Here we are. I took risks, so please, 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 please. I even drew you a chien. Can we say which is best? I think I was very careful when I put up the work on the board to look at, not to say that a careful piece of work, ticking all the boxes and getting a good mark, is bad. And I was careful not to say that writing random stuff you don't even know how to say yet is bad, because that may well be the thing that long term makes you a fantastic language learner. In fact, I don't want to characterize Kirsty or Dylan or Evelyn as being that sort of learner. That was the tactic they deployed. But I think we can probably say that the person who's going to really be driven forward in their language learning, whether they take it for GCSE or not, and will carry on finding out things for themselves and wanting to say things. I think some people have got that. I don't think we would want to stamp that out. I did promise a vision of coherence. I think you'll have to come to a different talk where we talk about pupils having this snowball of language, making the language their own, and it gets bigger and bigger, and you roll it across from one topic to the next. Because if what we go for is an even coverage with everything ticked off nicely, you come back the next morning and that's all melted. So the slow accretion of language and learning to use their language, as you can see these pupils doing. Here's another vision of coherence. This is where we started. Now, I think it doesn't have to look like this. Understanding meaning and creating meaning doesn't have to be at the extreme. It can be in the middle. Knowledge linked by conceptualization doesn't have to be extreme. It's not It's not incompatible with understanding meaning and creating meaning. They're not incompatible. They can sit together. And then what have we got at the extremes? We do not want it to be a knowledge of grammatical forms, just a collection for the sake of it. We don't want it to be a collection of random things pupils can say or understand, but with no conceptualization. So I'm absolutely happy with this diagram, that we all agree we don't want this, we don't want this, and we do want to work on these things, and it's perfectly possible. So that is my talk for Language World 2026. Thank you very much.